First of all, I have to apologize because I'm about to lose my voice, but I hope it's going to hold out for the length of the presentation. I'll try to speak clearly, but I won't be as clear as I normally am. As Erin said, the original GPR8 was actually a product of a collaborative learning initiative, and it was based on the experiences and skills of a small number of operational and security professionals. So it wasn't although Conrad van Brabant was the main author, there were many people who actually fed into that. And it was released at a time when there were very few security positions or policies on how to manage the risks that faced aid agencies in their operations. And this is partly because the attacks against aid workers were comparatively few. And I've nearly forgotten to give you my first slide. So the points we wanted to make was that it has been extensively utilized over the past decade. The global security environment has changed significantly since it was written. I mean, there's been a big increase in violent attacks against aid workers. I mean, admittedly, in particular countries, a small number of countries, Afghanistan, Darfur in Sudan, and a couple of others, but still a significant increase, and an upswing in events threats such as kidnappings. At HPN, we also track the requests for publications, and the GPR8 is one of our most downloaded resources. And we're aware from feedback that we receive from various agencies and from our consultations with those agencies as well, that many international NGOs in particular have incorporated whole sections of the GPR8 into their security management protocols and practices. I think that in the revised edition, and it's important to stress that this is a revision. Again, we went down the collective route, but we broadened the process considerably from the way it was managed the first time round. We had a very large advisory group, and Erin was an important part of that, and a number of other members I see in the audience today. We also sought the input of technical specialists, and the product itself was managed by people who had done significant research into the security issues facing humanitarians. Specifically, this is Adele Harmer and Abby Stoddard from Humanitarian Outcomes, formerly with the Humanitarian Policy Group. And much of that original research was undertaken at the Humanitarian Policy Group. And what we've tried to do in this new edition is to document changing practices from field-based personnel. So we've gone out and had workshops with people in Nairobi, in Bangkok, also in Washington to get the North American perspective, because here often we have more of a Eurocentric focus, and we've tried to really broaden that out. We've looked at specific issues and themes such as acceptance, active acceptance, risk management, and remote management, amongst others. And as Erin said earlier as well, this revision, it's not a complete rewrite by any means, because much of the original material is still relevant today. But what we felt was that we needed to take account of these changes in the environment. We needed to record that, to look at changes in practice in relation to those. We also needed to actually clarify and add nuance to areas within the GPR which we felt had been slightly misunderstood or were no longer, were slightly out of date. So we've tried to trim some of those things that we felt were no longer useful. And we wanted it was very important to us that it should remain practitioner focused, and that was definitely the feedback that we got from our network members. We've got about over 5,800 HPN members at the moment, spread worldwide. But from our members and from those we interact with on a regular basis in the humanitarian community, it was clear that the fact that this was an easy-to-use guide, easy-to-use resource, was important, and we wanted to maintain that practitioner focus. Before going into some of the specifics of the GPR, I just wanted to highlight what some of the key trends are that we're seeing now and that are facing humanitarian operations. Again, this steady increase in attacks against aid workers over the last 10 years. And, it's not that surprising given that the number of actors has increased, the actual number of people who are out there, the number of operations has increased. And the very nature of humanitarian action means that we're present in some of the most insecure places in the world. But this last decade has been particularly dangerous. There was the bombing of the UN offices in Baghdad in 2003, right up to the murder of aid workers in Afghanistan over the last few months. And we've had many, many significant incidents in between. And the Aid Worker Security Database, which is an independent initiative, provides some data. It's the most comprehensive data available, and I think it admits itself that it's not completely comprehensive. But it recorded in 1999 32 violent incidents. And in 2009, and there were 139 aid workers killed. In 2009, there were 278 aid workers killed. And if you look at the differences between national or local staff and expatriate staff, you see that national staff suffer, higher losses in proportion. And I think that this tracking of incidents is really very difficult, and it relies heavily on the willingness of agencies to share information. And for a number of reasons, many agencies find that difficult. And one of those difficulties is actually their own security themselves. Sometimes sharing that information can put them in danger. I mean, other motivations for these attacks include, criminality. I mean, simple financial gain, stealing aid assets, cars, sat phones, cash, etc. Aid is sometimes considered to be an obstacle to the objectives of the belligerents involved in the conflict. And increasingly, these attacks are often politically motivated, and that's something that aid agencies have been highlighting and pointing out for some time. Their association with military operations sometimes puts them at risk. Sometimes that's a direct attack against them. Sometimes it's by association because they're considered to be associated with those groups. Now, looking at the GPR8 itself and some of the key sort of new things that we've tried to do or things that we've tried to emphasize in this new issue. I mean, we've looked at risk assessment, which has evolved significantly in recent years. Sorry, I'm just going to have a quick drink of water. Really apologize for the lack of clearness. And in many ways, this is one of the most complex topics covered. Because this is a practitioner guide, we wanted to provide simple and structured guidance on the stages of analysis that need to be undertaken. We don't prescribe specific courses of action, but what we're saying is that these are the steps that you need to, go through or to look at, before you make your decisions. Security strategy. I mean, in the first GPR, you'll know that there was a lot of emphasis placed on the security triangle. Acceptance, protection, and deterrence being the 3 points of that. This GPR still discusses those elements, but the triangle concept is really abandoned. We're talking more now about how you use those 3 different approaches in combination to, better protect yourself and your operations. What seemed to happen with the triangle before was that an agency would decide where it sat on the triangle. And so it was either, okay, we're going to do acceptance, or we're on the deterrence side, or we're doing protection, when actually you do have to look at all 3 of those, and the balance will depend on your organization and the specific context that you're working in. We also undertake a much more comprehensive examination of an active acceptance approach, including suggesting possible indicators of how to measure the success in this area. Remote management is another area that we've emphasized in this GPR8. We've suggested some triggers and indicators and pointers to good practice in planning and preparedness. But it's remote management itself is a very tricky one. I mean, it's a term which has entered the lexicon, I suppose, of humanitarian security discourse over in fairly recent years. And it hasn't always received good press. But most agencies use it in these very difficult contexts. It also has implications, as I mentioned earlier, for the safety and security of national staff, because you're usually using either national staff or national partners to execute your programs in these sorts of situations. And so you're transferring risk in some respects to those people. And so those issues have to be thought about, and the GPR8, revised GPR8, encourages you to do that. Collective security, managing that. I mean, we've tried to highlight the significant improvements in information sharing and in some of the formal interagency security mechanisms which have emerged. And I think I'm sure many of you have been involved in these, and there are country-level ones like ANSO, the Afghanistan NGO Safety Office, GANSO in OPT, the NSP in Somalia, PACSAFE, which is becoming established now in Pakistan, and the Saving Lives Together initiative. These are all examples of the increased policy emphasis on the value of information sharing and of these coordinated approaches. And then finally, under crisis management, we've identified some significant organizational development in the area of crisis management, and in particular, in developing more systematic approaches to managing cases of abductions and kidnapping. And unfortunately, we know that several agencies have had to deal with this very difficult issue, very, very recently. Now, these are just a few of the key areas, and we look at many other areas within the GPR8, which I won't have time to go into today, and you can have a look at your leisure. But others such as, communications, good practice in personnel management, which is extremely important, donor financing. I just want to highlight a few of some of the key ones. Looking at risk assessment, I mean, what we've said in the GPR8 is we think there should be increased investment in risk assessment. I mean, this is fundamental to the management of security risks, but as a community, we're often very bad at it. And many agencies don't invest the time, the staff, or other resources in assessing the risks that are prevalent in a particular context, or even in context analysis more broadly. So we're encouraging that people to invest in this, as it's absolutely crucial. Even if it costs more, and it delays program implementation, it's essential for safer programming. And the GPR does provide some guidance on how to go about risk assessment. The strategies that we mentioned earlier, combining strategies. As I said earlier, it's important to look at the whole picture and to look at how you need to balance those different approaches, not just choosing one over the others. So agencies need to have a flexible approach to be reevaluating all the time the ways in which they're operating in a particular context, because this context can change. As I've just mentioned, remote management, to mitigate these secondary risks, mitigate the risks for those who are actually carrying out programming on your behalf or as an extension of your agency or your program. And so the GPR does pay particular attention to this as a strategy. Because remote programming, it can eliminate some risks, but it can also create others, as we said, to national staff and local partners. So it does point out some things that you should consider when looking at this. Coordination and collective management of security. Again, this is particularly important because security risks are very complex. I think I'm just about to lose my voice. And so I'm just going to finish up very quickly here because I'm almost finished anyway. It's important also to increase the investment in crisis management, both at headquarters level and in the field, and those links between the field and headquarters in terms of accountability and making sure that those communication links are strong is extremely important. And finally, donor support for good security practice, good security management, because this is not cheap. Having a good security practice, good approaches, it does cost money. And we think that donors should play an important role in ensuring that agencies have the understanding, the capacity, the expertise to effectively assess and respond to operational security threats. So thank you very much. I hope that you will find this new resource of value, and as usual, we would welcome any feedback, any comments, any feedback that you might have about it. Thank you.